A couple of very special guests. I was a guest on their show, Who Cares? All the way in from California are Cameron Tuttle and Randy Allen, and they are with the Honor Network. They work with private duty home care. We are kindred spirits. We work very hard together. Our goal is to provide the very best care for our elderly, our seniors, parents. And with Christmas coming up, the holidays coming up, there's a lot of times you have to have hard conversations. We don't want to have those conversations around holiday time, but sometimes it's the only time a family's going to be able to get together. So we want to talk about these conversations that need to be had and need to be said, and how we can do that easily, how we can have these hard conversations and make them easy at the holidays. So we've got some just great things to talk about. I take care of seniors. You all do too. We had a situation yesterday, just in fact, in home care. We had a patient, adult children had no idea how bad her dementia was until she got to the hospital. And it was so stressful. We had to step back. They needed to get an attorney involved. It was a really stressful day. They had made no arrangements. The adult children were at odds. Daughter did not know what her parents' wishes were. Son felt like he knew. And so how can we prevent something like that?
That is far too common a situation, Joe. And the holidays are a great opportunity to explore a little bit around your parents' homes or your grandparents' home, maybe, and kind of see, like, are there stacks of mail? Like, what's going on in the refrigerator? So that's one of the great reasons. Not only do people come together, but you can often see what's going on in their home and do a little bit of sleuthing to see maybe there's more of a decline going on here than I was aware of. Mm-hmm. The question is, how do you raise the subject in a way where your parent, let's say, is open to hearing that? And that's the real challenge. Like everything, timing really matters.
Yeah, I mean, and I would even say, I mean, like you've heard the old Ram Dass adage that, you think you're enlightened, go spend a week with your family. So, like, I mean, once you get with your family, you're going to go back into your patterns of where you've always fit. So, like, if you want to have this conversation, you got to plan how you want it to look to have the most effective outcome. So it's not like, oh, yeah, I'm going to talk to my parents about it. It's, how is this going to look? What question do I lead with? It's more important and a little, I don't want to say it's daunting, but it's a little more critical than it sounds.
Well, I think, you don't want to say, hey, pass the cranberry sauce. Dad, have you considered your end of life plans? Yeah. Probably not the best thing, but thinking it through in advance definitely is an important step. And what I find to be helpful is talking about your own role in the situation. Because if you go in and say, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? People can feel a little defensive and a little afraid actually to talk about these things. But what can be really positive is saying, I would really feel so much more comfortable if I had a clear understanding of your wishes and preferences and what's important to you in the later chapters of life. That would ease my soul. That would make me feel just like I'm comfortable helping if I need to.
Well, and part of life, everybody is going to pass. I mean, we know that. There's nobody.
Despite what some people think.
That's right. And so it's important, even for us. I mean, I have grown children, and they know what my wishes are. And I've seen, as a nurse, I see so many situations where a patient is on a ventilator and they would never want to be on that ventilator. Yeah. Being a hospice nurse for so long, the way I would approach it just in doing hospice was if there was a crisis going on, I would say, tell me if you had a cup of coffee with your dad or mother 10 years ago. So imagine being at a Starbucks having a cup of coffee and you had an open conversation. what would that be? What would their wishes be? And we've just got to be able to have this conversation, just like choosing what college
Yeah,
are your kids going to
absolutely.
go to, or even, better yet, what's going on at our neighborhood nursing home today? Do they have activities going on? It's a circle of life, and we just need to open up the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, people plan for births, weddings, college, and this is a really important part of life, and it's definitely worth talking about and planning for. One thing that I found that's a great tool, kind of an icebreaker, is a card game, and it's the Wish game, and the website is gowish.org, and it's basically just an opportunity to get people talking about and thinking about values and preferences, and it just starts the conversation in kind of a non-threatening way, and it's great to do sort of with intergenerational groups as well. You bring in a few teenagers into the mix and it's going to get a lot more interesting, but it can be a really helpful tool.
So is it light? Is it fun?
I wouldn't call it light. I mean, they ask questions like, so there are 36 cards in a deck, and then you're asked to sort of rank them by very important, somewhat important, and not important at all. But it helps you think through your own values. For example, do I want to die at home? Do I want to be surrounded by family? Do I want to make sure that I have chosen an advocate who really understands my needs? Do I want to be surrounded by my pets? That was what I added to my wild card. You can make your own up too as well. And so it's a really helpful kind of, I wouldn't say it's fun, but it's a sort of a safe way, and it's an interactive way to get into the conversation.
And people can't be afraid. We've had a situation with my father-in-law, had cardiac surgery. He did great, but the family, the adult children, 6 children, needed to have a conversation. And I think it was really hard. Who's going to start the conversation? But it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be hard. It should just be a matter of fact of life,
and
What I was going to even say is, having the conversation before there's a catastrophe is, preferred. And I think understanding who your audience is. Like, for example, my mom, she's 70 years old. Sorry, Mom, I outed you. But she still does splits at the holidays. I mean, she's in great shape. She's not in any need of any care anytime soon. But if I made it about her, she would push off the conversation. But if I make it about us as the children, the grandkids, she's so outward focused that she'd be like, oh, I want to make sure you feel safe. So to your point, Cameron, this is going to help me feel better about caring for you when you get older. She'd much more engage in that conversation than, hey, Mom, what do you want? Because she would just spiral, go, I don't know what I want. So it's neat to understand your audience and approach them that way.
And also, most of our parents were there for us. Not all of them, but most parents were there for us, and they spent a lot of their time and effort and money taking care of us. So it's the perfect time to say, hey, I want to be here for you. How can I be most helpful?
Well, and one thing, I know with seniors, and we know because we work with seniors, they don't want to be a burden.
True. Yeah.
And that's an obstacle that I see families, adults, the seniors say, oh, I don't want to be a burden to my daughter, or so just put me in a nursing home. Well, nobody says, in 10 years, I'm going to pick out that nursing home that I really like. Nobody wants to go to a nursing home. So, what are those steps? What are we going to do as we age? And, what are our wishes? What do we want to do? I know there is a wonderful tool that's on the internet called the Conversation Project. And it's a great project to start a conversation. Just questions of fill in the blank. You can get it online. It's free to download. It's a nonprofit organization, the Conversation Project. And that is a great tool also on just having some questions in place to get the conversation started.
Yeah, I have heard about that. I have not actually gone through that myself, but it sounds a little bit like another organization I was going to mention for your listeners. It's called 6stepslivingwill.org, and it's the number 6. And this was developed by Richard Stewart, who's a professor of psychiatry, I believe, a professor emeritus out of the University of Washington. And he and some of his colleagues developed a very detailed kind of question and answer protocol, again, that helps you really know Like if this, if I'm faced with two choices, which would I prefer? And it's different. I mean, the answers are going to be different for everyone. And in fact, the only thing that he says, the only wrong answer is not thinking about it and coming up with specific answers that are right for you.
So do you have an example of a question?
Let me see if I can pull something up here. I knew you'd ask that question, Joe. Let's see if my internet is working. You know what, this is going to take me a little bit of time to get into. Well, for example, do you want full, aggressive, or curative treatment? Which, in some cases doesn't really make a lot of sense from a quality of life standpoint or a financial standpoint near the end, depending upon what's going on, if there's cancer or another illness. Do you want limited treatment, or are you just interested in comfort care only, in palliative care, and managing the pain? And that's just sort of a initial framework that they look at. And it gets really, really in-depth, actually, which is why I recommend this as a tool. It's a lot more detailed than the typical sort of medical power of attorney and like the POLST, the other types of documents that most people are advised to fill out in advance. It talks about faith and family and spirituality and some of the more personal but very, very powerful parts of end-of-life discussions.
So Randy, what are your thoughts? What do you want when you get to that age?
Okay, geez.
Or you're in a situation,
Well, I mean, I think for me, where my mind even goes right now is that there's just layers and layers of discussions. I mean, this isn't just, okay, it's Thanksgiving, we can carve out 90 minutes and talk to mom or dad. This is weeks and months at a time, because there's so much regarding your finances, your health, who do you want around you, where do you want to be, how do you want to age, is it in home, is it out of home? Would you be willing to move if you're on 2 stories, you want to go to 1 story? So my point is, you got to just start to have the conversation. You have to have that initial conversation, understand that this isn't just going to be one and done. It's going to be Christmas, Thanksgiving, next year St. Patty's Day.
And your feelings may change over time, but it can be fun. I was at dinner with my aunt and uncle and one of my cousins last month, and my aunt and uncle want to go out on an ice block. They want to be like sort of Eskimo style, They're like, just put us out together on an ice float and we'll be happy. And obviously they're joking, but it did kind of give me an idea of, there's going to be a time when they're going to be ready to let go, and that's going to be great, and they're at peace with that. So it was a lighthearted, great entry into that conversation.
And I wasn't skirting your question. So for me, I think if what I would want is, one of the things that's important to me is finding someone who I trust to help me with finances. So I think it's that, and then probably having someone else who is really in tune with healthcare is kind of be my healthcare advocate. So I'd want to have point people, and then have those discussions with them as I age.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so many times people are in crisis and they don't know what to do. And of this family I met with yesterday, the daughter was like, I am a wreck. I don't know. I have no idea. And you've got to just guide me. So making sure you have the right people that will guide you and do your homework. Hey, Dad, I know this home is great, but your bedroom's upstairs. Have you thought about if you get to a point you can't walk up the stairs, what do you want to do? Just simple. Hey, I know my father-in-law, and I'm bringing him up again, Grandpa, but my father-in-law, he was afraid to go get the mail because he could trip. And so he would let mail kind of collect for 2 or 3 days. And just thinks, well, why don't we see if the mailman can bring the mail to the door? Simple little things that can make. The goal is to stay independent. Everybody wants to stay independent. So starting with the little steps, and if somebody says, they're going to have to take me out of my house and, on a gurney or
board.
Whatever.
Yeah, right.
Then, okay, if you want that, then we're going to have to do some baby steps.
And how do you plan? Yeah. How do you get things in place for that?
Do you have somebody that tidies up the house? And then maybe a little more than tidying up the house, you're going to need help with laundry. Maybe you're going to having troubles driving and having somebody to take you to the store. So just doing a little bit of it at a time to allow them to stay independent is important too, you know.
Yeah, I think the first step is figuring out what do people want, how do they want to live and where do they want to live, and then putting the steps in place to make that happen in a safe and comfortable way.
And one thing I'd add too is I think the only thing worse than not having the conversation is asking questions that are kind of conversation enders. So like if you ask
Yeah,
a
good
question and you don't have your own solutions or suggested solutions. So for example, your 2-story example, if you don't have, well, I was looking at some condos in your neighborhood or in a neighborhood near myself, like if you don't have 1 or 2 solutions, they may look at you and kind of go, no, I'm staying here, and you're kind of caught holding the bag. You don't have any solutions, and the conversation's over.
That's a great idea.
So I think it's always important to kind of have a couple solutions you might think might fit a mom and dad. Potential options, just to keep the conversation going.
I know.
Well, you want to help people see different possibilities. It can be really easy to get stuck in your ways and not want to change anything, but then where you're living now may not be the best place if it's a big house where you raised your 3 or 4 kids.
And there's just so much that most people who aren't in the kind of the senior space don't understand that are options. So there's just so much technology that's allowing people to live where they want to live, age how they want to age, but most people just aren't aware of it. So just kind of being open to if you aren't worried about any constraints of today, if you could do whatever you wanted to do, what would it look like? Believe it or not, there's a lot of solutions to be able to kind of help them.
Yeah, even home care. We work in home care. We talk about it, think about it every day. There's so many people who don't know what home care is, and until they're in a situation where a family member or loved one needs it. And then you're suddenly like, what do we do? How do we, often hospitals won't allow someone to be discharged unless there's home care or home health set up to support them during their recovery. So just learning about things, what are the options, like how do I stay at home with support?
And a lot of people think home care is Medicare's going to pay for it or Medicaid's going to pay for it.
It's a big topic.
It is a huge topic, and it's not, if the Medicaid program in Texas is, I think, 4 hours a day and you have to meet criteria. I don't know what it's like in California, but for the most part, people have to pay. It's paying privately for care. So, and a lot of our seniors here, oh, well, I've saved this money for my kids. I want to give it to them as their inheritance. And I'll have this conversation. You know what? This is that rainy day you've saved for. This is going to allow you to be able to stay at home. This is going to allow you to be able to do the things that you want to do, just having a little bit of help, instead of making some drastic
having to move in with your kids or move into some sort of facility. Yeah, talking about the financial stuff, I'd love to mention another great resource. The company is called Golden, and we actually interviewed the founder, Evan Ollinger, on our Who Cares podcast, and it's a financial tool that's designed to help older adults help their parents financially, and it's basically it gives them view-only access to accounts. Make sure that you know where your parents bank, because a lot of families don't talk about this. So you don't know, is the house paid off? What's the garage code? And do you have sufficient resources to cover the kinds of care you need?
Do you have recurring subscriptions that you shouldn't be paying for? Yeah,
they look for holes in the bucket. They make sure that everybody's taking advantage of the social services that they're eligible for. Protect against fraud. The website is joingolden.com.
Wow.
I really recommend that. It's a new company, and it's a really smart way of kind of a solution to a big problem.
Well, and we had a patient that got a call from a company called Toys for Toddlers 3 or 4 years ago. It wasn't Toys for Tots, it was Toys for Toddlers. Yeah. And it was a scam, and she wound up giving $3,000 over the phone. And so they wound up having round the clock because they were terrified. I mean, she was the most giving person. Yeah. And so it is so important to know, elderly are the ones that are such victims of scam. Yeah. And, it's happened in my own family. My grandmother gave money thinking it's
happened in my family too.
Yeah, she gave her checking account information over the phone. She was told that she had an IRS bill, and anyway, we wound up getting it resolved, which was fortunate for us, but not for everybody, you know. So these kind of things
Yeah,
happen. So
yeah.
this golden, it's Join Golden.
The website is joingolden.com, and they do kind of an assessment of the financial situation, and they do not have access to anybody's money, but they do give you some consultations, and they can set up view only access to banking accounts and brokerage accounts and things like that, and they do guard against fraud, which is super helpful because, you know, if you notice that there's a potential fraud early enough, it can be reversed. Otherwise, it's way too easy to lose a lot of money.
And just for the listeners, if you do go in, if you guys go in to meet with a family, or I do, if I suspect any type of fraud, abuse, neglect, we are by law obligated to report that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we have walked in, I've seen situations that are so horrible, and people have the resources, and either they're afraid to spend the money, or they're giving money to an adult child that's the wayward adult child, and the other adult children are angry or frustrated. So it's always so important to get an outside resource involved.
Sadly, the most common perpetrators of fraud, elder fraud, are family members and close friends. And sometimes, you know, caregivers. And I had in my family a situation where it was a private hire caregiver who was recommended through a caregiver support group, seemed safe at the time, turned out to be a real nightmare, exerting undue influence over somebody with mild cognitive impairment. And it was really difficult to get this woman out of the house. So you want to be really sure that you know, and you've done a thorough background check on any caregivers who are in the house of your older relatives, for sure.
So what do you say to the adult senior who says, Randy, I don't want I don't want you to spend my money. You know, I want my money for you. So what would you say to that? Give an answer if a listener is trying to have a conversation and the parent doesn't want.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it goes down to their values. So you have to understand their values. So, for example, if it was my mom, what's most on top of her value list is her family. So her children and her grandchildren. You know, for me, I got two little ones. I got a 4 and a 2-year-old. So it's like, I want my children to be able to come into your home and spend more time with you and get to know you. You know, getting care at your house, investing into you is going to allow them to do that. If you're in a nursing home, it'd be a different story. We obviously would come visit you, but we wouldn't be able to go. My 4-year-old loves my mom's basement. He calls her Mama, so he loves going to Ohio to go to Mama's basement. That wouldn't happen if she wasn't in her home. So I think it's understanding their values and talking to them according to their highest values is the best way to get the outcome you want.
So these sites again, I know we talked about the Conversation Project.
Yes.
It's conversationproject.org. And tell me those sites again.
GoWish.org
GoWish.org
is the card game that's kind of a conversation starter. And then 6stepslivingwill.org, and that's the number 6, 6stepslivingwill.org, for a more kind of comprehensive and really detailed, more of a tough love approach. But I think it's very reality based is important in these situations.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And, thank you so much. I hope we've made a difference, and we're going to be able to help some families that need to have the conversation. And it was just an honor again.
Thank you for having
so
us,
much.
Jo.
We enjoyed it.
You all enjoy the cold Texas weather too.
We
Love
sure
it.
will. Happy holidays to
You
listeners.
too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Dominius Deus.